The wealthy cowboy offered water to the Apache woman, and that evening she invited him to her home. The sun had climbed high in the sky, casting its relentless heat over the dusty trails that wound through the outskirts of the small Arizona town. The desert stretched endlessly, a mixture of reddish-brown soil, scattered rocks, and dry brush. It was the kind of day when even the strongest animals sought shade, and the kind of day that tested a person's patience and endurance. On this particular afternoon, a tall, broad-shouldered man rode steadily along a narrow path, his leather boots resting in the stirrups and his hands gripping the reins of a strong chestnut horse. The man was known locally as a wealthy cowboy, though wealth was not what defined him in the eyes of most people. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, a sense of responsibility that came from years of working on the ranch and managing land that had been in his family for generations. Despite his fortune, he treated others with respect and humility, a trait that made him well-liked even among those who were suspicious of outsiders. As he rode, he noticed a figure in the distance, moving slowly across the sun-baked terrain. At first it seemed as though the woman was carrying something heavy, her shoulders hunched and her steps deliberate. As he drew closer, he could see more clearly. A woman, alone, holding a clay jug of water, her hands red and raw from the heat, her feet kicking up dust with every step. Her hair was dark and pulled back in a simple braid, her skin tanned from hours spent under the sun. There was something in her stance, a quiet strength, that immediately drew his attention. She did not stumble or falter, yet the jug she carried seemed far too heavy for one person to manage easily under the desert's scorching heat. The cowboy slowed his horse, watching her carefully. Something about the scene struck him, not just the obvious struggle of carrying water under the relentless sun, but also the determination in her movements. She was focused, unyielding, yet there was a faint hint of exhaustion in the way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. He knew from experience that dehydration and sunstroke could be dangerous in these conditions. Without a second thought, he guided his horse closer, raising a hand in greeting. "Ma'am," he called, his voice firm but friendly. "Do you need some water?" The woman paused, her eyes flicking toward him. There was a moment of hesitation, as if she were unsure whether to trust a stranger. Then, something in his tone, the calm sincerity, seemed to reassure her. She nodded slowly, a faint smile forming on her lips. "Yes, thank you," she said softly. Her voice carried a melodic, steady quality, calm, yet carrying the weight of the afternoon's labor. The cowboy dismounted, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. He reached into a leather bag at his side and pulled out a cold, clear bottle of water, the condensation glistening in the sun. Handing it to her, he said, "Here, take your time. You look like you could use it." The woman accepted it with both hands. Lifting it to her lips, she drank slowly, savoring the cool liquid as it ran down her throat, easing the dryness that had built up over the long walk. The relief on her face was visible, and for a moment there was silence between them. It was the kind of silence that does not feel awkward, but rather comfortable, as if the desert itself had paused to witness the brief meeting. "I appreciate this," she said, finally lowering the bottle. "It's not often someone stops to help out here." The cowboy shrugged slightly, brushing dust off his sleeve. "We all need a little help sometimes," he replied. "I couldn't just ride past." Her eyes studied him for a moment, curious. There was something in the way he spoke. No condescension, no expectation, just a simple, honest offer of help. He noted the worn leather of his boots, the sun-bleached hat shading his eyes, and the way he carried himself with ease and assurance. There was a quiet dignity about him, one that seemed different from the hurried townspeople or other travelers who often passed through without a second glance. Well, I live just over that ridge," she said, gesturing toward a line of low hills in the distance. "I was bringing water back for my family. It's hard work, especially in this heat." "I can imagine," he said, his gaze following the direction she pointed. "The sun doesn't forgive anyone out here. You've got quite a job on your hands." She nodded, a faint crease forming between her brows, not from worry, but from the fatigue of carrying her burden. There was a quiet pride in her posture, though, a pride that said she could handle what life threw at her, even when it was exhausting. The cowboy felt a surge of respect for her. It wasn't just the physical strength, he realized, but the strength of character, the resilience that comes from enduring hardship with dignity. "You know," he said after a moment, "if you ever need an extra hand, I'm usually around these trails. Don't hesitate to ask." The woman's lips curved into a small, polite smile. "That's very kind of you."
"Thank you. I don't often meet people who offer help without expecting something in return."
The cowboy tipped his hat slightly, a gesture of respect. "It's no trouble at all. Sometimes it's the little things, offering a drink, lending a hand, that matter most." She nodded again, looking down at the bottle in her hands before setting it aside carefully.
"You're right," she said. "It's the little things that can make a difference in a day like this."
There was a brief pause as they both considered the vast expanse around them, the endless horizon, the sun dipping closer to the afternoon's peak, the dry wind carrying the scent of sagebrush and dust. It was a moment that felt suspended, as if time had slowed to allow two strangers to connect in a small but meaningful way. "By the way," the cowboy said, a trace of curiosity in his voice, "do you mind if I ask your name?" "My name is Lila," she said softly. "Lila," he repeated, as if tasting the name in his mouth.
"I'm Daniel," she said, nodding.
There was a warmth in her tone, a hint of cautious friendliness. For a few more minutes they exchanged small talk about the weather, the land, and the challenges of living in such a harsh environment. There was nothing rushed or forced in their conversation. Each word was measured, respectful. Daniel learned that Lila was deeply connected to her family and community, proud of her heritage and traditions. Lila noticed that Daniel, despite his wealth and status, spoke with a simplicity and honesty that made him approachable and genuine. Eventually, Lila shifted the jug on her shoulder, signaling that it was time to continue her journey. "I should get back before my family worries," she said, her voice carrying a sense of responsibility and care. Daniel nodded, stepping aside to let her pass. "Of course," he said. "Take care, Lila, and remember, if you ever need water or anything else, don't hesitate to stop by." She gave him a final nod, a small smile playing on her lips. "I will, Daniel." "Thank you again." As she walked away, Daniel watched her until she disappeared behind a rise in the dusty path. There was something about her, something more than just the simple act of carrying water in the heat, that lingered in his mind. Her strength, her dignity, the quiet way she carried herself, all of it left an impression he could not shake. He mounted his horse and continued on his own path, yet a sense of curiosity and admiration followed him, as if the encounter had planted a seed that would not easily fade. The desert, vast and unchanging, seemed to hold the memory of that brief meeting. The sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky with shades of gold and crimson, and the wind whispered softly across the dry land. For Daniel, it was a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful connections are found in unexpected moments, in the simple act of offering water to a stranger on a hot day. And for Lila, the encounter would remain with her as well. There was something in Daniel's calm presence and genuine kindness that stood out in a world where people often passed by without noticing one another. She found herself thinking about him as she finished her work for the day, wondering about the man who had stopped to help without expecting anything in return. Neither of them knew it at the time, but that small gesture, the offering of water in the sweltering heat, would mark the beginning of a story neither would forget, a story that would grow from a simple act of kindness into a connection built on trust, respect, and shared understanding. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the desert floor, both Daniel and Lila carried with them a sense of curiosity and anticipation, each wondering what the future might hold after a chance meeting in the heat of the day. The day slowly gave way to evening, the desert cooling slightly as the sky shifted to soft oranges and purples. Daniel rode on, but the memory of Lila and her quiet strength stayed with him. Lila, on the other hand, went back to her family's home, the jug now full, her heart lighter than before. The simple exchange of water had done more than quench thirst. It had sparked something neither of them could yet name, a beginning that neither could predict, but both would remember. And so the desert remained vast and endless, Yet in that expanse, two lives had briefly intersected, leaving a mark that would not fade with the setting sun. As the afternoon sun began its slow descent behind the jagged desert hills, the heat finally softened, leaving the desert bathed in a golden, almost magical glow. Lila returned to her small home, a modest adobe structure nestled at the edge of a low mesa, carrying the water she had fetched. The house was simple but well kept, a testament to her careful attention and the pride she took in her family. Inside, her younger siblings played quietly in the corner while her mother prepared dinner, the aroma of simmering beans and roasted vegetables filling the air. Lila set the jug of water down, her hand still tingling slightly from the effort of the journey. She couldn't shake the memory of the man on the horse, Daniel, as he had introduced himself. There was something unusual about him, she thought, something that made her feel at ease, despite having met him only minutes before. He had not judged her, not commented on her work, nor treated her as though she were insignificant. In a world where strangers often looked past her and her family, his kindness stood out like a rare flower blooming in the harsh desert soil. That evening after dinner, Lila found herself glancing toward the window, almost expecting to see Daniel's horse waiting outside. She chuckled at herself for thinking such a thing, but the thought lingered nonetheless. She remembered the way he had dismounted with care, the calm in his voice, and the genuine concern in his eyes when he offered her water. It had been a small gesture, a simple act of kindness, yet it had left a deep impression. Something about it made her feel that the world was not as harsh and unforgiving as it sometimes seemed. As the night settled, Lila's thoughts returned again and again to Daniel. She realized that the brief encounter had sparked a curiosity she had not felt in a long time. The desert was a place where people often kept to themselves, where interactions were fleeting and cautious. But Daniel had reached out, even if only for a few minutes, and it had made a difference. She wondered about his life, his work, and what had brought him to this part of the desert on such a hot day. She even considered the possibility that he might pass by again, though she did not want to let her hopes soar too high. Meanwhile, Daniel rode back toward his ranch, the steady rhythm of his horse's hooves calming his mind. He thought about Lila, the way she had carried herself, strong and determined despite the heat and the heavy jug, her composure, the quiet dignity in her movements, and the warmth in her voice, all lingered in his thoughts. He had met many people in his life, neighbors, ranch hands, travelers, but rarely had someone left such a lasting impression after so brief an encounter. Over the next few days, Daniel found that he could not stop thinking about Lila. He often rode along the same trail, ostensibly to check on fences and livestock, but he also hoped to catch another glimpse of her. He reminded himself that he needed to be respectful, to approach her cautiously, and not impose. The memory of her smile, her polite nods, and the soft yet confident way she had spoken stayed with him. He realized that the encounter had awakened something he had not expected, a sense of connection and interest in someone he barely knew, yet whose presence felt familiar in an inexplicable way. One evening, as the sun began to set and the desert cooled, Daniel found himself near the ridge where he had first seen Lila. The colors of the sky shifted from gold to pink, then deep purple, and he felt a calm settle over him. To his surprise, he saw movement near the edge of the path.
There she was, Lila, carrying another jug of water, her posture straight and determined. When she noticed him, her eyes widened slightly, but she did not appear alarmed.
Instead, there was a small, knowing smile on her lips, as if she had expected him to be there. Daniel dismounted once more, keeping his horse close but calm. "Evening, Lila," he said, his voice gentle. "I hope I'm not intruding." She shook her head. "Not at all," she replied. "I didn't expect to see you again, but it's nice that you're here." For a moment, they stood in silence, watching the desert around them, the wind brushing lightly against their skin, carrying the scent of dry sage and distant pine. Then Lila spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "You know, if you're not busy, you could come by my home tonight. My family and I could use some company, and I'd like to thank you properly for your help the other day." Daniel's eyes softened. He had not anticipated such an invitation, and a wave of warmth ran through him. He felt a mixture of curiosity and excitement, tempered by respect for her and her family. I would be honored, he said, choosing his words carefully. I'll make sure to be polite. That evening, Daniel rode slowly toward Lila's home. The desert was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. As he approached the adobe house, he could see smoke rising from the chimney and the faint glow of lanterns in the windows. The sight was comforting, a warm, welcoming scene amidst the harshness of the desert. Lila greeted him at the door, her expression a mix of pride and nervous anticipation. "Come in," she said softly, stepping aside. Daniel entered, taking in the simple but tidy interior. The house smelled of home-cooked food and desert herbs, a comforting aroma that immediately made him feel at ease. Lila's mother, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, welcomed him warmly. "You must be Daniel," she said. "Lila has told us about you." Daniel nodded politely, shaking her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am," he said. The warmth in her tone and the genuine smile made him feel accepted, even though he was technically a stranger in their home. Dinner was served and the family gathered around the modest table. There was a quiet joy in the air, the kind of simple happiness that comes from being together and sharing what little they had. Daniel listened as Lila's family spoke of their day, the work they had done, the chores completed, and the stories of the desert that shaped their lives. He shared stories of his own as well, speaking of the ranch, the animals, and the challenges of managing the land. He spoke without pride or arrogance, focusing instead on the effort and care required in his work. As the evening progressed, laughter filled the small home. Daniel found himself drawn into the stories of Lila's family, their humor, their wisdom, and the way they supported each other. Lila, too, laughed freely, her earlier reservations giving way to a sense of comfort and ease. It was a rare moment of connection, where differences were acknowledged, but did not divide them. The barriers of culture, status, and expectation seemed to fade in the warmth of shared experience. At one point, Lila's younger brother, curious and energetic, asked Daniel about his life on the ranch. "Do you ride horses all day?" he asked, eyes wide with interest. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "Not all day, but a lot of the time. It keeps me busy and I enjoy it. There's a lot to learn about the animals, the land, and making sure everything is taken care of."
Lila watched him, noting the genuine care in his voice.
He spoke not as someone showing off wealth or status, but as someone deeply involved in the work he did, committed to the responsibilities he had taken on. She felt a growing respect for him, a recognition that his kindness was not just a fleeting gesture, but a reflection of his character. After dinner, the family gathered outside to enjoy the cooler evening air. The desert stretched around them, calm and quiet, under the blanket of stars. Daniel stood a little apart, observing the scene, the simple house, the warm lantern light, the laughter of children, and the soft voices of adults. It was peaceful, a contrast to the harsh, relentless desert heat of the afternoon. Lila joined him, carrying a small cup of tea. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, handing him the cup. "It means a lot to my family, and to me." Daniel accepted it with a nod. "I should be thanking you," he replied. "You welcomed me into your home. It's not something I take lightly." For a few moments they stood together, drinking their tea, watching the desert sky darken and the stars begin to twinkle. There was a quiet understanding between them, an acknowledgement of the bond that had begun with a simple act of kindness and had grown stronger with shared time and conversation. As the evening drew to a close, Daniel prepared to leave. Lila's family thanked him for coming, expressing genuine appreciation for the company and the stories he had shared. He nodded, smiling warmly at each of them. "It was my pleasure," he said. "I hope we can do this again sometime." Lila walked him to the door, a faint smile on her lips. "I hope so too," she said. "You're welcome here any time." Daniel mounted his horse, looking back once more at the small adobe house, the warm glow of lanterns against the desert night. He felt a sense of gratitude and curiosity, a desire to see what the future might hold. This simple gesture of offering water had led him here, to a connection that felt genuine, meaningful, and rare. As he rode back toward his own ranch under the silver light of the moon, Daniel thought of Leela, her family, and the quiet strength she had shown. He realized that this was more than a chance encounter. It was the beginning of something that might change both their lives, built on respect, kindness, and the simple yet profound connection of two people meeting under the vast desert sky. The days that followed Daniel's visit to Leela's home were filled with a quiet anticipation. The desert heat still lingered during the day, but the mornings and evenings carried a softness in the air, making the work outside slightly easier. Daniel continued his routine on the ranch, checking fences, tending to the horses, and inspecting the land. Yet his mind often drifted toward Leela and her family. He remembered the laughter of her younger siblings, the warmth of her mother's welcome, and the gentle way Leela had spoken to him. Those memories stayed with him like a comforting presence that made even the hardest work seem lighter. Meanwhile, Lila found herself thinking about Daniel too. She admired his strength, not just physically but in the quiet confidence he carried. He had entered her home without pretense, without any sense of superiority, and had treated everyone with respect. That evening she replayed the conversations they had shared, the way he had listened to her family's stories and shared his own experiences without boasting. It was rare for someone to show such genuine interest, and she found herself hoping to see him again, not out of necessity, but out of curiosity and a growing sense of admiration. A few days later, Daniel found an opportunity to stop by her home. He had been checking a distant water trough for the cattle and realized he was near the ridge where he had first seen Leela. His horse trotted steadily along the dusty path as he approached her home. Lila noticed him first, her eyes lighting up with recognition. She waved and Daniel returned the gesture with a smile. "Hello, Daniel," she called, her voice carrying across the quiet desert. "I wasn't expecting to see you so soon. I was just nearby," he replied as he dismounted. "I thought I'd check on you all and see if you need a hand with anything." "That would be very kind of you. My family could use some help with a few chores." Inside, the atmosphere was lively. Her siblings were chasing each other playfully, and her mother was preparing a small batch of food for the evening. Daniel offered to help with anything he could, and Lila assigned him to a simple task, carrying firewood from the pile near the yard to the small stove inside. Though the work was basic, it allowed him to interact with her family in a natural way, without imposing or drawing unnecessary attention. As he worked, he noticed how careful Lila was in organizing her home and caring for her family. She moved gracefully from task to task, showing attention to every detail. Daniel admired her efficiency and the calm determination with which she handled everything. It was not hurried or rushed work. It was precise, deliberate, and thoughtful. He realized that her strength was not just physical but also mental, a capacity to manage responsibilities while maintaining a sense of grace and composure. During a short break, Lila brought him a cup of tea and a small plate of bread. "You've been working hard," she said, setting the items on a small table outside. "It's nice to have someone willing to help without expecting anything in return." Daniel accepted the tea with a nod. "I enjoy helping." "It's not about expectation. It's about sharing effort and making a difference where you can." They sat together for a while, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. There was a gentle breeze carrying the scent of desert flowers and sage, and the sounds of the evening, crickets chirping, distant birds calling, and the quiet rustle of leaves created a peaceful backdrop. For a moment, words were not needed. Their presence was enough, a silent understanding forming between them, reinforced by shared effort and mutual respect. Over the next several weeks, Daniel visited more often. Sometimes it was to deliver supplies he knew they needed, such as extra firewood, fresh vegetables, or tools for repairing fences. Other times it was simply to spend time helping with chores or sharing a meal. Each visit strengthened the bond between them. Lila began to trust him, confident that his intentions were honest. Daniel, in turn, admired her resilience, her wisdom, and her dedication to family. Despite the growing connection, there were challenges. Not everyone in the surrounding community viewed their friendship positively. Some neighbors whispered, questioning why a wealthy cowboy spent so much time with a woman from a different background. Lila noticed the occasional sideways glance and heard hushed comments, but she did not let them affect her judgment. She had learned to value character over opinion, and Daniel had proven his worth through consistent actions, not empty words. One afternoon, a small crisis tested their growing bond. A sudden summer storm rolled through the desert, dark clouds obscuring the sun and strong winds whipping across the land. Lila's younger brother had been helping in the yard when he slipped on the muddy ground and twisted his ankle. Lila rushed to his side, but the ankle was swollen, and he could barely walk. Daniel, who had been nearby checking on a distant fence, arrived just in time to help. He carefully lifted the boy into his arms and carried him to the house. Lila followed, anxious and grateful. Once inside, Daniel and Lila worked together to tend to the injury. They cleaned the wound, wrapped the ankle in cloth, and applied a cooling compress. Their movements were coordinated, natural, and respectful of each other's space and skills. The incident, though minor, brought them closer. Lila saw Daniel's patience and gentle approach, while he witnessed her calm and methodical care for her family. After the boys settled comfortably, they sat together outside, watching the storm clouds break and the desert floor shimmer under the rain. The air smelled of wet earth and sage, and a rainbow stretched across the horizon. Lila glanced at Daniel, a soft smile on her face. "You've been very kind, Daniel," she said quietly. "Not just today, but every time you come here. My family and I appreciate it more than I can say." Daniel looked back at her, the fading sunlight highlighting her thoughtful expression.
"It's not about appreciation," he replied.
"It's about doing what's right and being there when someone needs help. That's all that matters to me." There was a pause, a quiet moment where neither spoke. The storm had passed, leaving the desert cool and calm, and the two of them shared a sense of accomplishment and connection that went beyond words. It was not romance, not yet, but a bond of trust, understanding, and mutual respect that felt just as significant. As the weeks turned into months, their friendship deepened further. Daniel helped with repairs around the home, fixed broken fences, and even shared some of his knowledge about tending to livestock. Lila, in turn, taught him about the desert, the plants, and the traditions of her family and heritage. Each visit became an opportunity to learn and grow, to see the world from another perspective, and to appreciate the value of shared experience. One afternoon, they worked together in the yard, lifting heavy sacks of grain and carrying water from a nearby trough. Their hands occasionally brushed, causing a small spark of awareness, though neither addressed it. They laughed together, teasing gently about who could carry more without complaining. In those moments, the lines between helper and host blurred, replaced by companionship and understanding. Not all days were easy. There were moments of fatigue, frustration, and minor disagreements about how tasks should be done. Yet even these challenges became opportunities to strengthen their bond. They learned to communicate clearly, to respect each other's opinions, and to compromise when necessary. Lila realized that Daniel's patience was genuine, not performative, and Daniel discovered that Lila's determination was rooted in love for her family and community, not stubbornness. Through all of this, the desert remained their backdrop, a vast, sometimes harsh landscape that mirrored the resilience they both carried within themselves. The rising sun, the whispering winds, and the wide-open skies became a silent witness to their growing friendship, a constant reminder of the small but meaningful ways people could impact each other's lives. One evening, as the sun began to set in brilliant shades of orange and red, Daniel and Lila sat together on a low ridge near her home, watching the desert stretch endlessly before them. There was a quiet contentment in the air, the kind that comes from hard work completed and a day well spent. Lila glanced at Daniel, noting the calm in his eyes, the faint smile playing on his lips, and the way he seemed completely at ease in her presence.
"Thank you for everything," she said softly.
"For helping my family, for being here, for being you."
Daniel looked at her, a gentle warmth in his expression. "You don't have to thank me," he said.
"I choose to be here because I want to, because it matters to me. And because I enjoy your company, Lila. Simple as that." For a moment, neither spoke. The desert stretched before them, a vast expanse of red and gold, fading into the purple twilight. Their connection, formed from small acts of kindness, trust, and shared effort, had grown stronger with each passing day. It was a friendship rooted in respect, understanding, and mutual admiration, one that could endure challenges and flourish in the quiet moments they shared. As night fell, the stars began to twinkle above, and the desert cooled. They stood stretching after a long day of work and walked back toward the warm glow of Lila's home. Inside, her family welcomed them with smiles and laughter, grateful for Daniel's presence and the help he provided. The evening ended quietly, with Daniel mounting his horse once more to ride back toward his ranch, and Lila waving from the doorway, a smile lingering on her lips. Neither of them knew what the future would hold, but one thing was certain. Their friendship had become a bond neither would forget. It was built on shared effort, trust, and respect, growing stronger with each passing day. And in the vast, endless desert they had found something rare. A connection that was both simple and profound, capable of lasting long after the sun set and the night embraced the land. The desert had changed with the seasons. The scorching summer heat had softened, giving way to cooler mornings and evenings, and the land, once dry and dusty, now carried the faint scent of new growth after rare desert rains. The air was fresher, the sky a deeper blue, and the evenings were calm, perfect for quiet reflection. For Daniel, those cooler days offered more than just comfort. They brought a sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement that grew each time he thought of Lila and her family. Their friendship had deepened steadily over the months, and with it a stronger connection had begun to form, a bond built on trust, respect, and shared experiences in the vast desert that had brought them together. Daniel had arrived at Lila's home in the late afternoon, as the sun began its gentle descent toward the horizon. He rode slowly, letting his horse take a steady pace along the familiar dusty trail. His thoughts wandered to the moments they had shared, working together to repair fences, carrying water and supplies, tending to the small challenges that came with desert life. Each memory reminded him of Lila's quiet strength, her unwavering determination, and the warmth she had shown him from the very first encounter. When he reached her home, he found Lila outside, arranging firewood near the small stove. Her hair was loosely tied, a few strands brushing her face as she worked, and her eyes lit up when she saw him approaching. She waved and Daniel smiled, dismounting and walking toward her. "Good evening, Daniel," she said, her voice soft but welcoming. "I wasn't expecting you so early."
"I thought I'd come before the sun set," he replied, his tone gentle.
"There's still plenty of work to do, and I thought I could help." Lila nodded, her lips curving into a smile. "You're always welcome. It's good to have another set of hands around here."
That evening, they worked together in quiet harmony.
Daniel carried supplies from the cart to the house, while Lila prepared a simple meal. Their conversation flowed naturally, full of laughter, small stories, and shared observations about the desert and the land. It was a comfortable companionship, one that required no pretense and allowed both of them to be themselves.
After dinner, they stepped outside to enjoy the cool evening air.
The sky was painted in soft shades of pink, orange, and purple, and the desert seemed to hold its breath in quiet admiration. Daniel and Lila walked toward a low ridge near her home, a spot they had grown accustomed to visiting together. From there, the view stretched endlessly, a panorama of rugged hills, sparse vegetation, and the fading sunlight reflecting off the rocks. It was a perfect place for reflection, conversation, and quiet moments shared in mutual respect. "I've been thinking," Daniel began, his voice calm but carrying a hint of something deeper, "about how much I've learned from you, from your family. From this place, you've shown me a lot about strength, resilience, and patience." Lila glanced at him, a subtle blush rising on her cheeks. "And you've shown me that kindness can come in the smallest of gestures, that helping someone without expecting anything in return can mean more than 100 grand gestures. You've been patient and respectful always. I didn't expect to find someone like you out here in the desert." Daniel smiled, feeling the weight of her words. "I never thought I would either," he admitted. "But meeting you has changed the way I look at things. You've reminded me that life isn't just about work or wealth, but about connection, trust, and caring for others." There was a brief silence, comfortable and warm as the desert around them seemed to settle in acknowledgement. Then Lila spoke again, softly but with conviction. "Daniel, I want you to know my family trusts you, and I trust you. You've been here through everything, not just helping us but showing respect, understanding, and care. That means more than I can say." Daniel looked at her, feeling a quiet swell of emotion. He had never felt this way about anyone before. Not just admiration, but something deeper, a sense of belonging and connection he could not easily describe. "Thank you, Lila," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I feel the same way. Being here with you, it feels right. You've taught me so much, and I hope I can continue to be someone you can rely on, someone you can trust." The evening grew cooler, and the stars began to appear, scattered across the desert sky like diamonds. The soft chirping of crickets and the distant call of an owl created a peaceful soundtrack to their quiet conversation. Daniel and Lila sat together on a large rock near the ridge, the warmth of shared companionship wrapping around them like a gentle blanket. As they sat side by side, Lila reached for a small, smooth stone and tossed it lightly into the desert below, watching it bounce across the sand. "You know," she said with a faint smile, "I never imagined that a simple act, offering water, could lead to all of this. You've become a part of our lives, Daniel. It feels natural somehow." Daniel nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "It started small, yes, but sometimes small gestures lead to the most important connections. I'm glad it did. I'm glad I met you." The words hung in the air, carrying a quiet sincerity that needed no embellishment. For a moment they simply sat together, allowing the desert night to surround them. The bond they had formed over months of shared work, trust, and respect had grown stronger, deeper, and more meaningful than either of them had anticipated. As the night deepened, Lila invited Daniel back inside her home. Her family welcomed him with warm smiles and quiet laughter. The house, modest but full of love, felt more like a home than ever. That evening they shared stories, music, and small acts of joy, playing simple games, recounting memories of past seasons, and even teaching Daniel a few traditional songs from her heritage. The atmosphere was light and joyful, yet filled with a sense of meaning and respect that made every moment feel significant. After the family had settled for the night, Lila and Daniel stepped outside once more. The moon had risen, casting a soft silver glow over the desert. The quiet was profound, broken only by the distant sound of an owl and the gentle whisper of the wind across the rocks. They stood together side by side, looking out over the land that had brought them together. "Daniel," Lila said softly, I think we understand each other in a way that doesn't need words all the time. You've been patient, kind, and respectful, and I want you to know that I care about you more than I expected to." Daniel turned to her, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "Lila, I care about you too," he replied, his voice steady. "I never thought I could feel this way, but being with you, seeing your strength, your kindness, and the way you care for your family, it matters to me."
You matter to me.
For a moment they simply looked at each other, the desert around them a silent witness to their words. There was no rush, no pressure, just a quiet acknowledgement of the feelings that had grown naturally over months of shared experience. The next morning, Daniel helped Lila with chores around the home, as he often did. But this time there was a different energy, an unspoken understanding, a sense of partnership that went beyond friendship. They moved in sync, anticipating each other's needs, and their laughter and conversation flowed effortlessly. Lila's family noticed the change too, seeing the mutual respect and admiration that had grown between the two. Over the following weeks, Daniel and Lila worked together on projects that mattered to both of them. They repaired fences, planted a small garden, and even worked on preserving parts of the desert near her home. Each day reinforced the bond between them, showing that their connection was built not just on admiration, but on shared effort, trust, and genuine care. One evening, after completing a long day of work, they sat together outside, the sky ablaze with the colors of sunset. Daniel reached out and took Lila's hand, a gentle gesture that spoke volumes without words. Lila smiled, squeezing his hand in return, a signal that their connection was now undeniable, a bond built on months of shared experiences, kindness, and respect. As the desert night fell, they stood together, looking out at the endless landscape, the stars twinkling above. It was a quiet moment, full of possibility, hope, and a deep sense of belonging. The journey that had begun with a simple act of offering water had led to something far greater, a partnership grounded in trust, admiration, and the knowledge that they could face life's challenges together. In that moment, Daniel realized that wealth and status were meaningless compared to the value of genuine connection. Lila understood that trust and respect could turn a stranger into someone who mattered deeply. In the vast, endless desert, two lives had intertwined in a way that neither could have predicted, forming a bond that would endure for years to come. As they returned inside, the warm light from the windows spilling into the cool night, both knew that their story was just beginning. The foundation had been laid, built on kindness, trust, and shared experience, and from it something beautiful had grown. In the quiet desert, under the stars, they had found not only friendship, but the beginnings of a deep, meaningful connection that promised to last a lifetime.